Science, Chapter 6 Food Chains and Food Webs. Organisms need energy to survive, grow, and reproduce. Producers make chemical energy from the sun by photosynthesis. Consumers get their energy from eating producers and other consumers. Decomposers get energy from dead material from producers and consumers. All living organisms are part of a food chain. A food chain is a series of organisms listed in a way that shows which is a food source for another. It shows a flow of energy through an ecosystem. It is called a food chain because each organism serves as an important link for transferring energy and matter. If an eagle ate a mouse, the food chain could look like this: sun to corn, corn to mouse, mouse to eagle. The food chain for any organism begins with the producer, which gets energy from the sun. A producer is food for a consumer. In this example, the first consumer is the mouse that eats the corn. The next level consumer is the eagle that eats the mouse. A food web shows related food chains. Within an ecosystem, consumers and decomposers can get food from several sources. So ecosystems contain many food chains that connect in many ways. Sometimes the food chains overlap. For instance, a food chain could start with a producer, such as a corn plant. If the corn is eaten by more than one consumer, then it is part of multiple food chains, one for each consumer that eats the corn. A food web is multiple connected food chains in an ecosystem. The arrows in the food web diagram point from the organism that is the food source toward the organism that eats each food. Animals that have no arrow pointing away from them are the top consumers. This means that there is nothing that eats them. The top consumers are usually found at the top of a food web, and they often are predators. Food webs are a picture of energy flow in an ecosystem. There is no way to include all the energy relationships in an ecosystem in a single diagram because there are way too many. Examine the food web on the next page. Find a food that more than one animal depends on. Locate an animal that eats several types of food. Which animals are top consumers in this food web? In this food web, we have mushrooms consumed by mice, mice consumed by snakes. We have corn consumed by mice, mice consumed by snakes. Corn consumed by chicken, which is then consumed by humans. Corn goes to grasshoppers. Grasshoppers feed crows and snakes. Corn also feeds humans. Corn feeds crows. Bacterium decompose snakes, humans, mice, chicken, grasshoppers, crows, corn, and mushrooms. Food chains and food webs show matter and energy flow. Each food chain or web starts with the glucose and other chemicals in a producer. The producer must be eaten by a consumer to be part of a food chain. Look at the diagram below. The movement of the matter and its stored chemical energy can be traced by following the arrow from one organism in the chain to the next. Kelp are large brown algae that perform photosynthesis, so they are producers. Sunlight feeds the kelp. Sea urchins eat the kelp. Sea otters eat the sea urchins. Energy in every common ecosystem can be traced back to the sun. Tracing the path of the arrows backward in a food chain or web will lead you to the producer. Look at the food web on the next page. This is a food web in a marine ecosystem. Phytoplankton are small photosynthetic organisms. They are our producers. They make glucose using energy from sunlight. Phytoplankton feed small fish and clams. Small fish are eaten by wading birds, large fish, and gulls. Clams are eaten by sea ducks. Osprey eat large fish. Bacteria decompose gulls, osprey, large fish, wading birds, sea ducks, small fish, clams, and phytoplankton. Food chains and food webs explain relationships. Food chains and food webs can help people understand relationships between living things in an ecosystem. For instance, if something causes there to be fewer otters in a kelp forest, a food chain or food web could help you predict the effect of fewer otters on other living things in the ecosystem. A food web can help you see which organisms depend on which organisms for food and survival. With fewer otters, there would likely be more sea urchins. This is because otters eat the sea urchins. Without otters, sea urchins would not be eaten. This means more sea urchins would eat more kelp. As a result, the kelp forest would be smaller. Other animals besides sea urchins depend on kelp forests to live in and to get food. The smaller kelp forest would also affect these animals.